Politics can be antagonizing when we don't understand why people vote for particular parties or when politicians go back on their promises. So how can we examine politics to get answers to these sorts of questions? Is politics fundamentally corrupt in its philosophy, or is it down to the psychology of the individual? The reasoning of philosophy has repeatedly applied itself to different political worlds. A good way of observing how philosophy has been practically used is to understand politics by studying political theorists and philosophers. Turning back time to ancient Greece, we will find Aristotle, who was among the first to apply philosophy to theorise new politics. During the Renaissance periods of different countries, we can pick out some influential names who have shaped political philosophy. Niccolo Machiavelli was part of the movement called humanism, where old princedoms were being compared to more republican forms of government. However, the political thinker Machiavelli is better known for his treatise The Prince, which encompasses a ruthless endeavour to gain and maintain political power. What is important to note is the significant effects political theorising can have among people and other thinkers. It's not just ink on paper, these texts fuel very ambitious people. Another political thinker, Rousseau, wrote about how social institutions corrupt the nature of man and darken our politics. Rousseau famously wrote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains," proposing new ideas that partly influenced the French Revolution. In philosophy, Rousseau is often compared against Thomas Hobbes. Where Rousseau thought the nature of man was inherently good and that we are just corrupted in our society, Hobbes theorised we are inherently destructive and it's not due to artificial corruption. Political philosophy has spread itself beyond Europe. The American author Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, where Paine criticised the autocracy of the British Empire. Like Machiavelli and Rousseau in Europe, began to adopt and theorise new republican forms of government. Of course, the Communist Manifesto cannot be left out, a political text written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, which gives birth to one of the most famous ideologies in history. So, when we take a philosophical lens to politics, we get very broad and debatable ideas about how the political world should work. It does use the human condition to understand politics, such as the disagreement between Rousseau and Hobbes over the nature of man, but it's theoretically ambitious when it comes to reforming an entire system of government. It may be a series of texts, but it's inspired historical events such as the French and American revolutions and formations of communist states. Political philosophy does very well at using the past and present to theorise and practice a new way of living politics, giving us powerful ideas. The psychology side is not full of triumphant victories over aristocrats, and it has less names attached to it formulating powerful ideas. Where the philosophy might be the politician in itself seeking change, the psychology is solely an observant experimenter. We move from looking at the operations of the state to the individuals living in political systems. The psychology of understanding politics started around the time of post-World War II. Stanley Milgram's famous obedience study is a good starting point. In this study, there would be a control panel and answering panel separated by a wall. The participant would be told to use the control panel to administer electrical shocks to the person on the other side every time they get an answer wrong. The experimenter sitting behind the participant would act as a vague authority figure. What was found that the everyday working person would continue to administer shocks to a voltage that would kill someone. This was just one study to understand how influential an abstract idea of authority can be. For reassurance, there were no real electrical shocks, the person on the other side of the wall was an actor, although there were some emotional distraught from participants afterwards. Bob Altemeyer is another psychologist who continued political psychology in the direction of understanding authoritarians, creating a quantitative method of rating how authoritarian someone is. Eventually, later psychology studies started to be more inclusive, realising there was more than political authoritarianism to study. Psychology started to break down political attitudes and ideologies in trait taxonomies. In other words, just like a Sims character has traits, so do different political attitudes. Conservatives rate high on conscientiousness and low on neuroticism, meaning conservatives have very good skills for focusing on work while having the emotional shield against stress and anxiety. Liberals, however, make up the conservatives' openness, making them creative and open-minded. However, they generally are high in neuroticism, meaning they are hit harder by anxious feelings. We have also discovered the tricky relationship if political attitudes are genetic or psychological. Before, political attitudes and beliefs were attributed to people's personality and social psychology. Some modern studies use a new interesting approach to politics. If genetics influences personality and personality influences political attitudes, then the assumption is genetics is the original influencer of political beliefs. When it comes to political issues, psychology can promote understanding over division. In recent times, right-wing political parties have used the nation as part of their campaigning, leading to some creating an association between promoting your own nation and prejudice. Psychologically, we have found this to be true, but not straightforward. When it comes to patriotism, this merely means someone is attached to their homeland and wants to care for it. The danger is in the form of right-wing authoritarianism, appears more when this promotion is in the form of nationalism, meaning not everyone who cares for their nation is returning to old 20th century ideologies. Between these early and more recent studies, psychology has broken down political attitudes of politicians and voters so we get a better understanding of each other and act as an antidote to dogmatism. Returning to our question, is it better to adopt philosophy or psychology when it comes to examining and understanding politics? Both fields have so much to learn from and more to dissect. It would be unfair to favour one over the other. When we want to examine the broader picture, structures of different governments, the human spirit in everything, and the consequences from history, political philosophy certainly has a lot to say. However, the composition of political attitudes, how one person reacts to politics, and examining recent political affairs from an individual perspective is better studied in political psychology. In essence, the philosophy is tailored to studying the state, whereas psychology is suited to studying the many individuals living within the state. Thank you for watching this animation. This has been the most intensive project for this channel so far, and many more to arrive. Thank you.